Okay, think about this for a second. What if your most dominant thoughts, the things just constantly running through your head, what if they weren't just background noise?
What if they were actually the main event, the creative force?
Exactly. The primary force shaping your reality, actively pulling what you want towards you, or maybe even pushing it away.
That really flips the script on how we usually think about things, doesn't it? Cause and effect turned inside out, and that's precisely the fascinating territory we're diving into today.
Absolutely. Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a really influential source that tackles this head-on. Excerpts from Claude Bristol's classic work, The Magic of Believing.
And we're specifically working from the 2010s Strategist edition you shared. It's packed with some pretty interesting stuff.
It really is. So think of this deep dive like we're moving through the key sections or ideas in these excerpts, almost like chapters. We'll unpack the core arguments, look closely at sometimes pretty startling examples Bristol uses.
Yeah, some of them are quite something.
Definitely. And we'll try to figure out the practical side of this magic. What does that actually mean?
And this whole deep dive is really designed for you, our listener. Our goal here is to guide you through this material, pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the aha moments.
Help you get really informed on Bristol's perspective without you having to wade through everything yourself. And we're going to kick things off by getting to know the man behind the book, Claude Bristol. Because his background, it gives some really crucial context for why he came to believe in this magic of believing in the first place.
Yeah, knowing who Bristol was is vital because it immediately tells you this isn't some abstract philosophy coming out of, an ivory tower.
Right.
Bristol wrote this book when he was already past his half-century mark, so he was bringing decades of very grounded, real-world experience to the table.
Exactly. He wasn't just sitting around theorizing. He explicitly says he had many years of hard, practical business experience. And even before that, he had a pretty significant career as a newspaperman.
And not just any newspaper job, right? He started out as a police reporter.
Yeah, think about that.
That detail is incredibly important. Being a police reporter that trains you, as he puts it, to get facts and take nothing for granted.
Totally. You're right there in the thick of it, dealing with evidence, witnesses, concrete reality. It's all about investigation, verification.
Which makes his later embrace of these, less tangible ideas about belief and unseen forces really stand out. It's almost a contradiction, isn't it?
It really is. He was trained to be skeptical, to demand physical proof. So when he started encountering things that didn't have an easy, logical explanation, they must have really jumped out at him.
And later in his newspaper career, he actually spent 2 years as a church editor for a major metropolitan paper.
Another angle entirely.
Right. That would have put him in touch with a whole different world, clergy, religious leaders, different belief systems. He'd be observing firsthand the effects of fervent faith on people and communities.
He also had the pretty significant experience of serving as a soldier in World War I. He was over in France and Germany.
Right.
And he stayed active in veterans organizations and a state commission for years afterwards. That kind of intense experience. It throws you into different environments, exposes you to hardship, resilience, maybe even some unusual stuff under extreme pressure. It broadens the perspective.
So you've got this foundation, practical business, hard-nosed journalism focused on facts, exposure to diverse beliefs from the church beat, and the intensity of military service. That's the backdrop for what he calls his early encounters with wonder.
Yeah, these were things he observed that just didn't fit neatly into that logical, fact-based box he was trained in. They made him, as he says, wonder about forces operating, beneath the surface.
He groups these early observations thematically in the source material, and it's fascinating to look at them. The first category seems to be around intense belief or emotion, leading to, seemingly extraordinary physical states.
Right, like watching people shouting hallelujah while they're immersed in icy cold water. You can almost feel that, can't you? What kind of belief lets you just ignore that level of physical shock?
It definitely makes you question our perceived physical limits. And he connects this to observing things like Indian ceremonial dances, specifically rain dance rituals, where the belief and energy are aimed directly at influencing nature.
He also mentions figures like Billy Sunday and Amy Semple McPherson.
Huge figures at the time.
Absolutely. Renowned for their charisma, their ability to whip up these intense emotional states, almost mass fervor in their audiences. These weren't subtle effects. They were very public, very dramatic.
Then there was encounters with unusual abilities or belief systems that seemed way outside the norm. He mentions the Mormons and the story of Joseph Smith and the plates of gold belief in direct supernatural revelation.
And the Doukhobors in Canada.
Right, known for things like disrobing when provoked behavior rooted in their deeply held, unconventional beliefs.
But the one that seems to have really hit him hard was when he was in Hawaii. He heard about the Hawaiian kahunas.
Ah, yes, the kahunas.
The claim was they had the power to cause death or life just through prayer and focused intent. That idea, that belief alone could have such direct, physical, life-altering consequences. He says it profoundly impressed him.
You can see how that would push the boundaries of his fact-based worldview significantly.
These kinds of observations apparently led him to directly investigate psychic phenomena, too. He tells a story about watching a famous medium completely fail to get any spirit communication in a crowded courtroom full of skeptics.
Even though her followers swore by her amazing seances in other settings.
Exactly. So he wondered why. Why did the power seem to vanish in that skeptical environment?
That's the reporter in him, isn't it? Always asking why. And later, he actually got a commission from his newspaper to write a series of articles specifically on the fortune-telling racket.
And this wasn't just reading about it. He went out and visited them, gypsy phrenologists, crystal ball gazers, astrologers, spiritualistic mediums. He describes hearing voices of old Indian guides and relatives I never knew existed. He was getting a first-hand look at this other world.
And finally, he talks about observations in hospitals, seeing surprising recoveries, people with serious issues bouncing back quickly, while others with seemingly less severe problems didn't make it.
He heard accounts of people with partial paralysis recovering in days, stories of rheumatism or arthritis cured by things like wearing a copper band or through what was called mental healing.
So these were all data points, right? Pieces of information that just didn't fit the standard materialist model. He was seeing effects, dramatic emotions, strange behaviors, maybe distant influence, unexplained healings without clear, conventional causes. It seems like this collection of experiences just gradually pushed him to dig deeper.
His early reading also played a part. He mentions the Bible, which was standard in his family, so that gave him a foundation in belief systems. But he was also really into practical science stuff, wireless telegraphy, X-rays, electricity.
So he knew terms like radiation, vibrations, oscillations, magnetic influences, but purely in that electrical context.
Right. The Bridge seems to have been a book he got after law school. Thompson J. Hudson's Law of Psychic Phenomena.
Ah, that book comes up again later, doesn't it?
It does. He admits he only read it superficially at first, maybe didn't fully grasp it or wasn't ready for it. But he clearly says it was the first thing that got him thinking about the subconscious mind.
So that seed was planted early on, the idea of a part of the mind working below the surface, holding real power, even if it took time to germinate. And he barely had an early, maybe unconscious experience of his own thought power during the war.
Yeah, he talks about being in France in 1918, just a casual soldier. And one evening, almost randomly, he made this firm declaration to himself. Someday, I would have a lot of money.
With no plan, no idea how.
None at all, according to him. He says he didn't realize then he was laying the groundwork or unleashing forces, or that he could build a fortune just with my thinking and believing. It was pure intent.
Interesting. And there was another experience, too, right? About wanting to be on the Army newspaper, the Stars and Stripes.
Yes. He really wanted that specific role, but he admits he had done nothing about it, consciously. No applications, no networking, nothing.
And yet
one day, entirely out of a clear sky, orders came through transferring him there. It seemed to happen to him, almost guided by some unseen force that maybe responded to his underlying ambition.
So you see this pattern building in his life and observations, practical reality bumping up against the unexplained. It suggests that thought and belief might have effects beyond the purely physical. That mix of skepticism and wonder really set the stage for his later work.
And from those early experiences, he moved into the business world, where he started to see these principles play out even more clearly in his own life.
Which brings us neatly into his personal demonstrations of belief's power, particularly around achieving wealth. He talks about his career as an investment banker, eventually becoming vice president of a major firm.
He was making good money, but the key thing he notes is, I realized that I was in a business where there were many opportunities to make money. He didn't know how exactly, but he says, I just knew that I would have that fortune I had in mind.
There's that knowing again, the firm belief in the outcome, even without the specific how-to manual yet.
And the result he reports is pretty remarkable. In less than 10 years, he says, he had a sizable fortune, was a major stockholder, had profitable side businesses. He basically achieved that declaration he'd made back in France.
And he links the success, at least partly, to a very specific, almost quirky practice, doodling.
Right, but not just random squiggles. His doodling was in the form of dollar signs on every paper that came across my desk.
Constantly, on file covers, phone books, meeting notes, anywhere he could.
He emphasizes it wasn't idle scribbling. It was a deliberate, constant, visible, mental picture he kept in front of him all day long. A continuous, tangible reinforcement of his focus on wealth.
It seems so simple, almost trivial, but he presents it as a powerful way to keep that goal image active, both consciously and maybe more importantly, impressing it on his subconscious.
Another really striking personal story he shares, hinting at these unseen forces, involves boarding a ship. He went to the dining room to get his table assignment.
Okay.
The steward was about halfway through assigning tables when Bristol got there. The steward just glanced at his ticket, looked at him, and immediately said, "Oh yes, table A, seat number 5.
Which turned out to be
The captain's table. Prime spot, right across from the captain. Bristol mentions that a lot of things related to his book's subject happened on that trip, including a surprise party supposedly for his birthday, even though it was months away and it was the captain's idea.
Wow. Okay, so later he wanted to use this story, and he wrote to the captain to ask why he'd seated him there.
Exactly. And the captain's reply is fascinating. He wrote something like, "Sometimes as we go through life, instinctively we get the idea to do this or that. As you came aboard, something told me to seat you at my table. Beyond that, I cannot explain."
So, coincidence. Just a lucky break. Or was it, as Bristol implies, something about Bristol's own internal state? His expectation of success, maybe that air of prosperity he developed is somehow influencing the captain's instinct.
It's impossible to prove, obviously, but Bristol uses it as another piece of evidence suggesting our inner world, our beliefs, might radiate outwards and influence events and people in subtle ways. His belief state perhaps aligning circumstances.
It fits his developing framework. So building on these personal stories, Bristol then tries to present the science of belief in a practical way, trying to avoid language that smacks of religion, the occult, or the metaphysical, which he knew turned a lot of people off.
Right, and this is where his business and journalism background comes in handy. He uses the language of a businessman, aiming for sincere thinking, clear writing, and simple language to make it accessible, practical, not mysterious dogma, but a workable principle.
He boils it down to that core idea. You can if you believe you can. And the old Latin proverb, believe that you have it and you have it. Sounds simple, but he frames it as a fundamental law.
He calls belief the open sesame to life, saying it's belief that changes thought in the unconscious mind, which he sees as the real engine of change.
And then he throws out that statement that he admits may sound incredible.
The one about growing a new leg.
Yeah. If the thought is changed in the innermost depths of the unconscious mind, then man will grow a new leg as easily as the crab grows a new claw. Whoa.
Okay, yeah, that definitely stops you in your tracks. Growing limbs. That's pushing mind over matter way beyond what most of us would consider possible, based on current science anyway.
Is he being literal there, do you think, or is it more like extreme hyperbole?
I think it has to be hyperbole. A really dramatic way to shock us into considering just how fundamentally powerful he believes the subconscious could be, even over physical reality, if we could only fully access it and bypass our limiting beliefs. It's like saying the potential is vastly greater than we imagine.
Right. It underscores his conviction that if you can truly change the deep programming, the results could be staggering. So from these personal stories and laying out the core idea, he moves on to examples from different areas to show this magic of believing in action.
Which brings us to belief manifesting in things like healing and business success. He starts with a kind of strange but maybe familiar example, warts.
The wart story. His friend whose hands were covered in them. Bristol suggests the idea of belief having power. And later, the friend looks down and
poof, the mess of warts had entirely disappeared.
What's interesting is the reaction he got from doctors. One well-known specialist just scoffed. Preposterous.
But another doctor, a medical school teacher, actually backed him up, citing authenticated cases of suggestion having been used to cure warts.
Bristol mentions he knew about historical accounts, too, like Swiss scientists, Heimenblock, using psychology and suggestion for wart removal, and even refers to Dr. Kaltz's work with fake irradiation getting similar results.
His conclusion is firm. These are actual examples of the magic of believing at work. He sees them as tangible, physical proof, even if the mechanism isn't conventional medicine. It's suggestion, working through the mind, causing physical change.
From that specific physical effect, he broadens out to discuss much bigger life results he claims to have seen, especially in business and personal achievement. He says he witnessed phenomenal results from his consultations and talks.
People doubling, trebling, even quadrupling their incomes using this science. He says his files were full of letters from people in all walks of life detailing their success.
He shares the story of Ashley C. Dixon. Dixon had studied the subject academically, but didn't truly believe it until he hit rock bottom, 43 years old, $65 to his name, no job, no prospects.
Wow.
In that desperate state, he decided to consciously set out to prove to himself that the science would work.
And according to Bristol, that deliberate application under pressure led to Dixon rising to great heights in the business world. A direct link between applying the belief and getting dramatic results when nothing else was working.
Another really powerful one is Don Quayle, a disabled American war veteran, former bank executive, suddenly hit with partial paralysis in his legs in 1924, needed crutches just to shuffle slowly.
Quayle wrote to Bristol years later explaining it was no easy matter at first to completely accept your ideas. But his situation was so dire, it forced me to keep at it continuously until understanding came. He didn't give up.
And the result he described was amazing, regained confidence, maintained the right mental attitude, followed by consistent action, and found success. He started a business with just one desk in a plumbing shop, and it grew.
He wrote that he was making a good living, saved his properties, and crucially now knows the formula that leads to the fullest success. And he adds, when you have that knowing inside you, fear vanishes, as do the obstructions.
That connects everything, doesn't it? The physical aspect, the business success, overcoming fear, all stemming from that internal shift. Bristol says he followed up with these people and they all reported continuing progress.
So these examples, from warts to overcoming paralysis and building businesses, form Bristol's evidence that this magic of believing is a real, usable force. But then he pivots pretty sharply to issue a very serious warning.
Yes, and he really stresses this point. I cannot emphasize this too strongly, he says, calling them solemn words of warning.
The warning is basically, if you try to use this science, this mind stuff, for harmful or evil purposes,
it backfires. It will boomerang and destroy you just as it has others down through the centuries.
It suggests there's almost a moral compass built into this power. Negative intent leads to self-destruction. He then makes a really direct, fundamental statement about the power of thought itself.
Plainly stating, your thoughts, those that predominate, determine your character, your career, indeed your everyday life. That's the core principle. No action happens without a thought initiating it.
He links this to timeless wisdom, like the Bible's, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And Shakespeare's, nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. He sees these as describing a fundamental law about thought.
He even brings in science from his time, mentioning physicists Sir Arthur Eddington and Sir James Jeans. Eddington suggesting the universe is, to an altogether unsuspected extent, a creation of our minds. Jeans suggesting it resulted from thought.
Which takes it from personal psychology right up to the cosmic level. Are our thoughts somehow linked to the fabric of reality itself? Bristol argues this understanding has been known and used throughout history.
He claims that powerful figures, religious leaders, kings, warriors, statesmen, intuitively grasped this science.
They understood that people act as they think and also react to the thought of others, especially when it is stronger. This allowed them to sway minds.
This influence, he says, has been used to lead people towards freedom or towards slavery. It's always been there, this power of dynamic thought.
He connects it back to cause and effect, but applied specifically to the mind, which he thinks people rarely consider. Highlighting ideas like everything is within, nothing is without, and mind is the source of power.
And to illustrate this inner-outer connection, he pulls from that El Dorado article from the 1930s, talking about finding the gold of our own spirits and using that inner wealth as the real currency in life.
Finding this inner gold, the article says, leads to freedom and all riches, achievement and prosperity. And the proof is in history, only those who found this inner gold achieved lasting, powerful things.
These self-knowing people, the article suggests, see the spiritual basis behind material things. Money, credit, supply, and demand, they see them as manifestations of spiritual law.
He also brings in Paracelsus, emphasizing imagination. A full and powerful imagination brings concrete form, And faith invigorates imagination, while doubt undermines it. Faith establishes the will. And ultimately, faith is personal. Salvation is individual.
The El Dorado article concludes, these self-knowers dwell in El Dorado, they drink from the fountain of youth, they own what they wish. Bristol uses this to drive home the point.
That hard work alone isn't enough.
Right.
You need this understanding, this principle of thought and belief for effort to really pay off.
Okay, so if thought is this powerful and using it negatively is dangerous, how do we consciously direct it towards positive goals? Bristol says it starts with something fundamental but often overlooked, getting crystal clear on what we actually want.
He asks the question directly, almost challenging you, the listener. What do you want out of life? And his observation is stark. Not 1 out of 100 people can answer these questions.
Most people, he says, just have a vague desire for more or better. They lack specifics. He uses that analogy of corks floating aimlessly on the water, just drifting with the currents because they have no fixed destination.
So he stresses, it's absolutely vital to know exactly what you want, to have a clear destination, a fixed goal, whether it's a big thing like a career change or small like a specific item. You must have that fixed idea before you'll get it.
And he distinguishes between a need and a desire. Need is basic, but desire is the prime motivating force. Without an all-consuming desire for something specific, nothing significant happens. Desire is the engine.
He hammers this home later too, saying desire is the generating power of action. The keener the desire, the sooner it happens. Mechanics help? Sure. But desire and belief come first.
But even with a burning desire, there are major roadblocks. And Bristol identifies fear as a huge one. He sees fear as fundamentally an imaginary factor, often just mental projections of bad outcomes.
Yet, paradoxically, these imaginary fears often become real. He cites Job. For the thing which I greatly feared has come upon me. Our fears can literally create the thing we dread.
He uses his own experience with colds as an example, saying he stopped wearing rubbers, got his feet wet constantly, sat in drafts, slept with windows open, and never caught cold. Why? Because he never gave it a thought.
He believed it wasn't the wet feet or the draft itself, but the fearful thought or the ingrained belief that those things cause colds that made people sick. Though he does add a caution.
Right. He's not telling you to suddenly ignore lifelong beliefs, because the consequences are real to you if you believe they are. You can't just flip a switch on deep conditioning.
But the core idea is powerful. Fearful thoughts aren't just passive worries. They are just as creative and magnetic in attracting troubles as are the good thoughts in attracting good things. Your worries are actively building the reality you don't want.
Exactly. And doubt and fear directly sabotage your positive goals by blurring the pictures you consciously desire to project onto the subconscious, like trying to project a movie through fog.
He also addresses that specific fear that stops you taking action on a hunch, like calling an important person. That inner voice saying, don't bother, they'll say no.
His technique for that is simple. Ask yourself, what have I got to lose if I do it? What harm can it do? Fear, being imaginary, can't really answer that logically, so act immediately before the fear takes hold.
Okay, so clarify desire, manage fear, foundational steps. How do we then actively imprint that desire onto the subconscious mind, that powerhouse Bristol talks about? He offers specific techniques.
He revisits the subconscious mind concept first introduced to him by that Thompson J. Hudson book, the idea of a dual mind, conscious mind in the head, subconscious below the line of consciousness. Emerson recognized it too, he notes.
He describes the subconscious as the home of intuition, a huge reservoir of power with inexhaustible resources, and it's ageless. It's the part that takes powerful instructions and just carries them out.
He argues its judgment is often better, virtually infallible, compared to conscious reasoning. He tells that story about the writer solving a plot problem in his sleep, the subconscious working away quietly.
He mentions a farmer columnist's friend, Mr. Sleeth, who considered his subconscious his greatest aid for everything from ideas to finding lost tools.
Sleeth's advice was, give it the thought, keep it going with a deep-rooted desire, and you will get results. Desire, again, fueling the subconscious engine. Bristol uses the saying, once we start weaving, the gods will furnish the skein. Meaning, results seem to magically appear once you set the process in motion.
Ideas just pop here and they will pop there at unexpected times. Bristol's method for getting specific answers is, tackle the problem consciously first. Then before sleep, order your subconscious to find the answer. And be ready to grab it when it appears.
And crucially, the subconscious works with images. That's why visualization is key. You need a clear projection, not blurred by doubt or fear, People with strong imaginations, artists, writers, inventors, often do this naturally.
One technique he really emphasizes, because it's found everywhere historically, is repetition and suggestion. He points out how repetition is central to religions, cults, orders mystical chants, prayers, rituals repeated over and over.
Like Tibetan lamas repeating prayers 108,000 times, or using chants for strength. He talks about how rituals, dramatic settings, symbols, music appeal to emotions, create vivid pictures, and implant ideas deep in the mind. That suggestion network, used for millennia.
He explains the law of suggestion, how phenomenal results are possible. Whether it's conscious suggestion, I can get this contract, or unconscious negative suggestion, I can't do this.
Then he gets into the darker side. Mass suggestion. He discusses figures who had a remarkable understanding of this, like Hitler manipulating a nation. He mentions Mussolini's slogans, believe, obey, fight. Stalin rated as a mass hypnotist.
And the Japanese warlords using fables and generations of suggestion to create fanatical devotion and suicide attacks. He's very clear that this power was used wrongly in these cases, reinforcing that warning about negative intent.
It's a stark reminder that the power itself is neutral. The intent determines the outcome. He also gives less extreme examples, like Knute Rockne's locker room speeches, using suggestion to inspire his team.
He points out that even fearful thoughts can create hard times through mass emotional thinking. And the panic from Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast is a classic example of belief created purely by suggestion. He argues suggestion is everywhere, influencing customs, styles, leading to a kind of mass hypnosis.
Repetition isn't just for suggestion, it's how power is developed. He uses the Milo and the calf analogy, lifting it daily as it grew, incrementally building strength until he could lift the bull. Consistent repetition builds capacity.
He gives practical advice for countering the negative suggestions we get bombarded with daily. People get confused by absorbing others' negativity. Salesmen taking on the prospect's doubts. Repetition of negativity is harmful. You have to actively close your mind to it and counteract it with positive thoughts. Willpower alone isn't enough because the suggestion affects you. You need positive repetition to displace the negative.
Building on the subconscious, working with images, visualization is central. He explains how imagination takes a fuzzy idea, like wanting a new home, and sharpens it into a detailed mental picture. You see the style, the location, the features.
The key is to not just think about it, but to see it in your mind's eye. See yourself already having the job or already taking the trip. Experience it vividly in your imagination as real.
And he offers great examples. The mechanic needing a drill but not wanting the hassle. He just kept getting to thinking about it. And that focused thought sparked ideas using scrap lumber, remembering a nearby shop leading to a creative solution.
Or the injured man doctors thought would be crippled. He remembered his mother saying, "One just has to believe." He held that mental picture of being okay, believed it strongly, and recovered fully, even going back to crawling under cars. He used the same method later for business challenges.
There's the story about the gasoline coupons during rationing. His friend desperately needed them for hunting. He held a constant picture of hunting using his car and someone giving him coupons. Despite the scarcity, he got more than he needed. His reaction, "It may be hooey, but I got the coupons." The result mattered more than the explanation.
And the classic golf example. The guy always hitting into the water hazard, advised to blot out the picture of water and see instead an easy short fairway. First try. Ball near the pin. Technique worked consistently, unless his concentration was broken by friends teasing him, then splash. The dominant mental picture controls the physical action.
To make visualization more concrete, Bristol suggests using visual aids, like writing your goal fortune, home, a specific phrase on cards. Make duplicates. Carry one, put others where you'll see them often. Bedside table, mirror, desk.
He compares it to executives using pictures or mottos. The cards are just a much more concentrated form. Keep the image constantly before you. And he notes, when you do this, the ideas for how to achieve it often pop up, unexpectedly act on them.
Maybe the most dramatic technique is the mirror technique. He tells that incredible story of the obviously drunk man about to host a dinner party.
Right. He goes into a room, stands before a mirror, holds onto the dresser, looks himself in the eyes, and repeats forcefully, you're sober, cold sober.
And comes out completely transformed, a perfect host all evening. Bristol saw it as powerful self-suggestion, directly hitting the subconscious.
He says he taught this technique to thousands with very unusual results, like helping crying women by having them look in the mirror and ask if they saw crybabies or fighters. He claims the crying stopped, that looking at yourself forces a confrontation with your self-image.
He points out famous people used similar methods, Winston Churchill practicing speeches in the mirror, evangelist Billy Sunday being versed in it.
He even describes using it in a sales office mirrors with slogans like, "We're going to win," and "How many are you going to sell today?" He claims results were huge, doubled or trebled business and income. He got letters confirming its effectiveness.
His instructions are clear. Stand before a mirror, waist up, look into your eyes, state your goal forcefully, repeat phrases often. He says it helps control thoughts, builds magnetism, and you can teach it to employees.
Then there's the more speculative but intriguing idea of thought radiation or vibration. He wonders if thought is more than electricity, maybe a vibration. Connects it to healing touch, Dr. Burr's research on electrical fields around living things.
He offers that experiment of trying to make paper on a needle spin just by concentrating.
He mentions a utility executive's theory from the 30s that everything we do, say, or think creates some kind of radiation, potentially measurable someday. Uses the pebble and water analogy for thought ripples. The power depends on constancy, intensity, like a radio station signal.
He discusses the idea that ideas fly, transmitting mind to mind like moths communicate. Tells that story about him and his advisor having the exact same manuscript idea simultaneously.
He wonders about animal telepathy, using the example of birds gathering instantly for unseen food. Mentions theories of animal wireless.
He applies this to humans, blind soldiers developing facial sight, that instant like or dislike of someone before they speak, suggesting some form of thought transmission.
This radiation idea provides a potential explanation for affecting others at a distance, like the lawyer visualizing the recipient while dictating letters, or the saleswoman knowing the customer wanted the book, or the wife influencing her husband's decisions through thought.
He describes a telepathy experiment with colored slips that he claims demonstrated thought transmission, requiring spontaneity, clear minds, and rapport, with potentially astounding results. Mentions Owen D. Young believing in extrasensory perception, feeling a truth.
His conclusion is that these phenomena, whatever you call them, mind power, vibration, telepathy, psychokinesis, which he mentions regarding talismans, are real and pervasive, more evidence of thought's power.
These techniques offer tools, but Bristol is clear. Belief needs action in the real world too. It directs action, but doesn't replace it.
Right, no passive wishing. While thought is the real power, he admits the material world often seems run by people of action, those great dynamos of energy. Uses Tesla, idea from his mind, but coupled faith with action to build the machine.
He really pushes initiative. Tells the story of the elderly man staying sharp by deliberately starting something new every week, keeping his mind and imagination active.
Initiative is key to success, he says. Lack of it keeps people stuck. Finding new ways, suggesting improvements like those suggestion boxes in factories. There's always a better way, even in simple jobs.
Linked to that is interest and attention. More interest in your work means more attention, better results. Find work that interests you, that absorption creates momentum, like the assistant manager getting the top bonus because she was so invested in her department.
He also stresses knowing your world, especially your job and industry. So many people don't learn beyond their immediate task. The executive betting employees didn't know company basics.
Your current job is a stepping stone. To move up, learn about the job above, the company, the industry, and for job hunters. Focus on how you can help the employer appeal to their self-interest.
He introduces a very modern-sounding concept, packaging yourself. Like attractive packaging sells goods. Personal presentation matters.
Eye appeal, clothes, colors, overall appearance set you apart. The world accepts you as you appear to be. Learn from marketing, Hollywood, even restaurants.
But it's not just surface. The you within can do the same thing for the outside you. Good packaging plus inner quality is unbeatable. Creating an air of prosperity influences how others treat you, like the well-dressed person getting better treatment.
And it affects how you feel. Getting a shave, haircut, wearing sharp clothes gives a sense of power, makes you feel like you could lick his weight in Wildcats. Proper attire, right attitude, fixed goal, inner power that others respond to.
He also talks about association and vibration, how others affect us more than we realize. We subtly take on characteristics of those we're around constantly, like attracts like.
The rotten apple analogy. Negative emotions are contagious, weeping, laughing, yawning.
So to stay positive, avoid associating too much with any negative or pessimistic personalities. Even counselors can be affected. Choose your associations wisely.
He includes that quirky story about the fire chief who believed he wouldn't be killed on the job. His ritual of throwing a white circle around himself learned from Indians. He claimed it worked. Bristol notes, Maybe it's the worst hooey, but it has worked. An example of applied belief for protection.
Finally, making friends. He quotes Emerson. The only way to have a friend is to be one. Law of reciprocity. Be a friend. Get friendship back.
And it connects to mental projection. What you get back reflects what you project mentally. Send out friendly thoughts, sincerely. People respond positively. Apply the golden rule.
Sincere compliments work, too, gratifying the ego, like politicians do, or the friendly paperboy creating a valuable contact for later.
Bristol doesn't just give principles, he highlights people who embodied them, often overcoming huge challenges. He dedicates a good chunk to profiling remarkable women.
He uses that striking quote calling women supreme egotists. When they believe in an idea, they will stop at nothing. The female of the species is more deadly than the male, suggesting an intense capacity for belief and will.
He notes women moving into male fields, science, arts, government. WWII roles gave them a taste of new opportunities.
He details Mrs. R.E. Bondurant's incredible 40-year record. Reforms, charities, child labor laws, homes for girls, helping the blind and handicapped. A human dynamo fueled by great belief, spirit, and determination.
Sister Elizabeth Kenny, bringing her controversial polio treatment from Australia, faced huge resistance from U.S. doctors, but was convinced to the nth degree. Her utmost belief brought hope despite opposition.
Captain Mary Converse still sailing thousands of miles at age 75.
Florence Nightingale, a powerful example. Vision of destiny, obstacles meant nothing, faced scoffing, opposition from officials, but her iron will and belief drove her on. Her letters filled with dynamite roused public support, still active and determined even in old age.
Carrie Nation, the temperance crusader, convinced she was divinely appointed smashing saloons, believed completely.
Evelyn Nesbit, continuing stage work late in life due to lifelong belief. Madame Schumann-Heink, the opera singer, connecting her power to the subconscious. Tell yourself over and over again that there's no limit to the creative power within you.
Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, claimed God wrote it, but described seeing the incidents, suggesting a subconscious source.
And the controversial Opal Whiteley, claiming royal parents, eventually accepted by royalty. Bristol discusses the theory she knew secrets and could mentally transmit her thoughts, essentially using belief and influence to create her reality. He notes the evidence she was treated as royalty.
He lists contemporary examples, too. The Soong sisters shaping China, Mrs. Ogden Reed in radio, Amelia Earhart, Mary Roberts Reinhardt balancing career and home.
This impressive list, he says, shows the power of applying these principles. The subconscious helps gain things and supports development, regardless of age.
These profiles reinforce the idea. Focused thought and belief can lead to extraordinary results.
Bristol finds evidence even in unexpected places, like gambling streaks.
Right. He suggests those streaks aren't just luck, but tied to the gambler's all-knowing feeling, a deep-rooted belief that they can win. Magic of believing playing a role, thought, and expectancy, potentially influencing outcomes.
And charms or talismans, no power in themselves, he says, but the believer develops psychokinetic force through their belief. Belief is the key.
He acknowledges belief is fragile, easily lost, cures can recur, people rise and fall.
Why? Suggestive influences in unguarded moments. Doubts, fears, negativity creeping in. You have to constantly guard against them.
In his conclusion, he circles back. This power isn't exclusive.
Yeah.
Great men and women didn't have exclusive access. You and every other man and woman have it.
The only requirement, all you have to do is to use it. You become what you envisage. Dominant thoughts create from within and attract from without. Cause and effect mentally.
Positive thought leads to action and realization. And his final core message. But the real power, much more than action itself, is the thought. Remember, thought is the power.
So, boiling it all down, Bristol argues passionately, using his life and many anecdotes, that belief, fueled by clear desire, amplified by visualization and repetition, and protected from doubt, is a fundamental science, a science with real, tangible effects.
Yeah, he presents it almost like a natural law, like gravity. It's operating whether we're aware of it or not. The trick is to become aware, understand it, and consciously direct it.
And for you, listening, this deep dive suggests you hold this significant, maybe largely unused creative power right inside your own mind. It's not just about outward effort, but about the focused energy of your thoughts and beliefs.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Given Bristol's core idea that thought is the real power, and that fear and doubt are the main blockers, where in your own life might you be unintentionally getting in your own way? Not through lack of effort, but maybe through persistent beliefs or fears you haven't really examined or consciously tried to change.
What small shift in belief starting right now could potentially open up entirely new possibilities for you?
Something to definitely think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the magic of believing.